Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Here we are again with our expert Q&A series. Today we have a very interesting guest. It's a person with a very impressive track record in Africa, because that will be the theme of our brief podcast. His name is Ben Zwinkels, and it's good to have you here, Ben, in our expert session. And maybe you can give us a brief overview. I know it will be difficult because you have a very impressive career, but tell me a little bit about your connection with Africa.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. It's always very important that we are really focusing also on spreading the news what's happening in Africa. I started in cutting interest in Africa in 1975, when I finished my studies. I was an auditor and accountant, and the Dutch government was looking for a financial controller for Cameroon. I decided to accept it, and I traveled in 1975 to Cameroon, where I was accepted as a financial controller for a cooperative credit union group in the Southwest province. I worked there for 4 years, and of course I learned about Africa culture. But in that time, in 1975, it's totally different from 2023. Mm-hmm. I have to say that I came back 2 days ago from 10 days visiting Cameroon. And well, I'm connected with Cameroon because of also adopted children, and quite a lot of activities apart from for auditing I have done. So I worked permanently 4 years, and later I kept the relation, and I started to work in that time also for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands, in the south of Tunisia. Mm-hmm. I was working there to promote SMEs, small scale enterprises. Yeah. And in the less favorite region of Tunisia, I traveled from the end of from Tunisia till the bottom of Africa, and I must explicitly tell you that in that time you could travel everywhere without any danger, without any risk. I was identified by FMO, the Netherlands Finance Company for Developing Countries, as an interesting person with African experience and also banking experience and banking background, and they invited me to work for them. So in April 82, I was employed by FMO, and focusing my job was focusing on following up investments in the West Africa zone, from Senegal to Sierra Leone to Cameroon to Abidjan, etc. That was the focus. But already quickly in around 1991, FMO became more and more interested in investing in the financial sector, the upcoming microfinance institutions, these companies and commercial banks. So I happily got financing from the Dutch government in a sort of, you call it seed capital, what you maybe now call startup financing. And so I was able to, in a period of a couple of years, 4 years, to invest in 25 financial institutions in Africa, young financial institutions, startup financial institutions with local sponsors, local promoters. And you see in that time the total different picture what you have in access to finance, and without, of course, any digitalization in that period.
So you're ahead of your time already, because startups is a very, let's say, popular team nowadays in Africa, but you were already very early in the process involved.
Yes, what we now have in all startup innovation, venture capital, compliance, mm-hmm. Environmental, social, all these aspects, they were not there. I had the chance really focus on investments with local partners, with local young, well-educated Africans who mostly came back from studying in England or the US. Yeah. And and I started in very short time, and I can tell you that 25 are still existing institutions. Some of them are very big. Some have merged with other institutions or other initiatives, but no one, I can tell you, failed, and no one is in a higher risk. But all those institutions came across the new way of doing in financial sector development, a new way of digitalization, new way of interbanking and
Interesting,
software.
interesting, Ben. I mean, yeah, this is an interesting aspect because as Boulder, we see that FMO is, yeah, a very important party, active in the African marketplace, as we have many structures, funds where we see FMO, the European Development Bank, as anchor investors, as we call them. So, yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive. We're talking 50 years almost. So this is really impressive. You told us you were involved through FMO, let's say in seed investing. Can you also share us a little bit, the emergence of private equity in Africa and how this has developed since then? Taking an example, AfricInvest evolution, where you have a very big involvement. You can explain that to our listeners. So the evolution from a pure private equity player to a pan-African investment platform with multiple strategies.
Well, thank you very much. This is a really an important question in order to show what has happened in Africa during the period, let's say, the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. In that time, we're also starting to focus, and that was just initiative out of the box, because FMO wanted to do smaller deals also, and we noticed that smaller deals cannot be, let's say, set up and supervised and monitored from the Netherlands. So I took the initiative with the same funding and the Dutch government funding to look with partners and to create small funds, small SME funds. I did 35 of these small funds. Wow. That time, Africa may have, that was around 1996, about 6-7 really private equity institutions in South Africa, a few in North Africa, and that was all. And now you can compare, we are now on maybe towards 350, 375 big investment groups in Africa operational. Mm-hmm. So we started in 75 to with a partner, for example, we were shareholder in the Fidelity group. Now the Fidelity Bank is one of the biggest banks in Ghana. I started also in Cameroon, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, but also in Abidjan, all kind of small investment funds with local groups who can help us manage it. There was no, let's say, jobs which you can you interfere in all levels. Maybe had that corporate governance was in that time a little less good organized, but we started to really to invest with this fund in very small companies in. For example, in Ghana, in fruit juice, in the hotels, in small houses construction, but also in agricultural business, also salt production in nearby the sea. So we started also this small fund, likewise in Cameroon. In that time, I should also be confessing that there was no ambition to make high returns. In that time, it was much more on impact. Okay. And the word impact was not existing. Let me be saying honestly. In that time, we look how many employees we could create, how many small entrepreneurs we can really let's say support.
But the thinking was alike. It was impact investing, although the word wasn't there, but you were already doing that.
Yes, and I must say that not all the companies were doing well. In 2000, we were thinking, we were very dynamic, out of the box, and we said, okay, now we should also use our experience to make some cross-border activities. We created 4 funds and all was investing in the three countries in North Africa. In 2003, I came back from 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 traveling to Africa and also to Kenya, but especially also the West Africa. And then I discussed again about strategy. We were always in every year we were thinking, what can we do now? And then we started really thinking about the first Pan Africa Fund. And I must say that was not easy, even to get the guys thinking about the rest of Africa. Likewise, half of the world were thinking Africa is poor, there are no opportunities. So it took me some time, but quickly we tried to convince, and we decided to send let's say a teaser to our investors, and our main investor was in that time still FMO as strategic partner, and we created our first AfricInvest fund with a total amount of 34 million. And then we started really creating our representative offices in Nigeria, Ghana, Abidjan, of course, in Morocco and Algeria and Cameroon and Tunisia. That was our first fund, and of course, in that time it was really more on principles of private equity, creating really solid companies, thinking about how can companies survive, sound financial analysis, building track record. We started also thinking about the financial sector, because I did also a lot of financial sector, and we thought, and we spoke with FMO, and it was really leading to a new initiative, the AfricInvest Financial Sector Fund. And the first fund was really small. I got funding from FMO and 20 million of euros, and I said I do not want to go on fundraising. You just give the 20 million, and we really will invest it. And success of this fund, and that is what is very important from the story. You can start with finance, with private equity, creating funds, but that you need to build a track record. And this track record is very important to give you sustainable development. And maybe I'm more, let's say, development minded, really focus on risk and creating value and creating also exits. So we all was combined in this. We created a new fund in 2017 in the financial sector, but in that time we said we should not wait, not have funds for 10 years, but it should be longer. And we succeeded to convince our investors and from the development finance, let's say, focus to create the AfricInvest Evergreen Fund, financial sector. And now this is really existing already 5 years. Every time new investors are coming in, and I must say the team. We have a really diversified team now in Tunis, but also in Kenya, working hard. And this fund is very successful.
It's incredible, because AfricInvest has become a multi-billion-dollar player. It's very interesting to hear. I know you're still involved because you're still a board member of AfricInvest. And what's also interesting in your story, because you said, I was always more involved in the development. So you are basically a front runner on impact investment, on ESG, because there's a big social element here, because you really want to help the African countries or startups and people creating jobs. So, the development from impact investing to ESG investment strategies, going into education, healthcare, finance, and agribusiness. It opened up new channels for financing and new investors that insisted on certain ESG standards, but also provided access to export markets for similar reason, right? So what you did basically is already what fund managers now build into their strategies, or what investors like. They want to see impact. They want to see a social element. And this is something you have done. So my question is a little bit like, so what factors are driving our private equity and venture capital investments in the region? And which countries and sectors do you think are having the biggest interests of let's say foreign investors, whether it's the FMOs, the European Development Banks, but also private investors.
Yeah, good question also again. And in that time, the impact or what you are creating,
Yeah.
and indeed we look to employment. We look in that time to complying with the social and economic rules in the country.
Yeah.
But nowadays it is of course it has a name.
Yeah.
Social environmental control, follow up. And nowadays it's not only that, but it's also climate protection.
Exactly.
And for me, sustainability, creating employment, but also creating employment for a long term, and not let's say we create something very high risk, and then after that you have to dismiss the people.
As you say, of course, there's some skepticism, and that's why it is important that people like you, that institutions like the FMO, the European Development Bank, and other institutional investors take the rein and make the investments, because they will pull the private industry as well. But you touched upon a particular thing. I mean, the regulatory frameworks in Africa. How do you see that? Because how will that influence investment decisions?
All those countries, the 54 countries, are all working on frameworks in order to protect foreign investors.
Yeah.
If it is directly or if it's an investment fund. If you see in the banking sector, where I have been so many years and also sitting in the board, the financial authorities, the central banks in all countries, I can say nearly all countries are very tough. The central banks are very demanding. I think all the countries are looking for better reputation,
right,
better attracting foreign investors. But if we as AfricInvest, we have our fund management and funds registration in Mauritius, and I must say, for example, you can say negative things about Mauritius, but Mauritius is the country of best doing business in Cameroon, in Africa, and
I have to agree, because Mauritius has the largest amount of bilateral investment treaties with all the African countries.
Yeah, but also the SFC, the financial authorities are highly demanding. You should know what type of request we get, or reporting standards from the financial authorities of Mauritius.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose anymore that they are temporary on the blacklist, because they are not very tough on money laundering control.
Understood. So you as the knowledgeable person saying, okay, the African countries are stepping up the plate in terms of let's say coherence with international standards, and Mauritius, I have to agree, also have done a lot in order to be removed from the so-called gray or blacklist. And we are aware, we have an office there, so very true. Very interesting, Ben. So to looking ahead, what are your expectations for future opportunities for private equity, venture capital in Africa? Are there any particular developments you expect to see?
The new generation of well-educated African people, and also the attractiveness of foreign investors to go to this large continent. I'm sure what I have seen from 2000 to now, it's completely and changed. If you compare it now than compared in 2000 or earlier. I believe strongly that the coming 20 years it will grow up. We started in venture capital. startup. There is so much on renewable energy, digitalization, banking. Now we start up with the whole banking sector is totally
Fintech, yeah.
Fintech.
Yeah.
There is a big group going on in the agricultural business and transformation, and you don't know what can be realized with the technology and the communication.
This is so to quote a famous singer, it's time for Africa.
Yes.
Well, Ben, this was very insightful. We really would like to thank you for your participation. People can reach out to you if they might have any questions, because you are by far the person that has the most extensive knowledge of Africa. And thank you very much for your participation at this expert session.
Jeroen, it was a great pleasure.